Humza Yousaf spoke of the brutal business of politics today as he announced he's standing down as Scotland's First Minister after just over a year in charge. He admitted he'd underestimated the hurt he caused by ending the ruling SNP's power-sharing deal with the Scottish Greens last week. Well, that move led to calls for a no-confidence vote in him, and survival means meant doing a deal with other parties. Now, speaking in Edinburgh, the First Minister said he wasn't willing to trade his values to hang on to power. The damage, he said, could only be repaired by someone else at the helm. Well, in a moment, we'll look at what this means for politics in Scotland and indeed the UK. But first, here's our Scotland reporter, Louise Scott, on the announcement and what happens next.
To everyone else, it was clear his time was over. The last step for the First Minister was admitting it.
Unfortunately, in ending the Bute House agreement in the manner that I did, I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. I have therefore informed the SNP's National Secretary of my intention to stand down as party leader.
His power move of dumping the Scottish Greens from the partnership backfired in spectacular fashion as the party, with just 7 seats, refused to back the First Minister in a no-confidence vote. First elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2011,
I, Humza Yousaf.
Hello.
He has held some of the highest roles in government before becoming the first Muslim leader of a UK party. But his upward rise hasn't always been smooth sailing, and his most recent miscalculation has left his party fighting for control.
Whoever is leading the SNP, they will need to find somebody's votes for every single vote as a majority government. If they want Scottish Green votes, then they know what kind of things we want.
The SNP has 28 days to elect a new leader, someone who can get the Scottish Greens back on board. That's unlikely to be Kate Forbes, the runner-up in the last leadership battle, due to her socially conservative views opposed by the Greens. A front-runner is John Swinney, the former Deputy First Minister, who's seen by many as a safe pair of hands.
I'm giving that issue very active consideration, and it's likely I'll have more to say about that in the days to come.
Of course, a leadership contest in the year of a general election is already giving ammunition to Westminster.
What people in Scotland deserve is a government that is focused on what they care about and not constitutional wrangling and obsessing about independence.
And Scottish Labour are calling for an early Holyrood election.
At a time when our country is crying out for serious leadership and a proper functioning government, when we have the NHS crisis, the economic crisis, we instead have a dysfunctional, chaotic SNP leading an incompetent government that is failing Scots every day.
13 months after taking on the role, Humza Yousaf's rise to the top ended in tears.
I'm so blessed for having the opportunity that are afforded to so few to lead my country. And who could ask for a better country to lead than Scotland?
As the latest SNP reign comes to an end, the race for a new leader begins again. Louise Scott, ITV News, Edinburgh.
Well, the resignation is another huge blow for the SNP, a party which has dominated Scottish politics for the past decade. And the fallout from Humza Yousaf's departure could also have a big impact on determining the outcome of the next general election. Here's our correspondent, Rachel Townsend, on the reaction.
Their dominance of Scottish politics was once unrivalled. The party many believed could finally secure independence. But now the SNP leader is on his way out, and they're once again reliant on opposition support to survive in government. And as they try to repair relationships with opposition parties, SNP voters fear their popularity is hanging by a thread.
Where do the SNP go from here?
I'm not sure. They're in a bit of a sticky situation at the moment. There's no clear, serious candidate to take them forward as far as I can see.
As an SNP voter, does that worry you?
It does, yeah. As I say, there's no direction for the party at the moment. There's no I can't see a light at the end of the tunnel for them.
What is the alternative?
Well, there isn't many at the moment. It's either going to be a shaky SNP or potentially Labour, but I don't think that's a serious option.
The SNP gained power under Alex Salmond in 2007. 4 years later, they clinched their best ever electoral result, becoming Holyrood's first majority government. The independence movement was gaining momentum. It led to the 2014 referendum, and although the Noes returned a narrow victory, the result saw Nicola Sturgeon take the reins. She delivered a string of landslide election victories. Few could have predicted her demise. Sturgeon's resignation in 2023 was followed by her arrest in June over the SNP's funding and finances. She was released without charge, but votes for the SNP began to fall away. Humza Yousaf was the man to win back confidence. He lasted 13 months. Last week's decision to end the Bute House agreement with the Scottish Greens left him with no option but to go. In his constituency of Glasgow Pollock, some voters there today were disillusioned.
So I don't think any of the SNP can do anything for us, to be honest. I think we need a new party, and whatever party comes in has got a fight in their hands.
It's a chance for someone else to stand up and do more.
Within the SNP or a whole change?
Within the SNP, of course.
If they survive this crisis, they still have work to do.
They've been in power in Scotland now for well over a decade. People are dissatisfied with the health service, they're dissatisfied with the education service, there are controversial issues on climate change and gender identity, all these kinds of things. The new leader is not going to be in a much more healthy position than the old leader to tackle. So I think the SNP have got a tricky few months and maybe even years ahead of them.
The next SNP leader will be decided by party members. They'll need a leader who can unite not just voters, but those within the party too. Rachel Townsend, ITV News, Glasgow.
Well, our scholar reporter Louise Scott is in Edinburgh. Louise, a really quite emotional statement from Humza Yousaf earlier on today. Who do you think is most likely to replace him?
It was emotional from Humza Yousaf at the end there as he conceded his time as SNP leader, but it felt inevitable. None of us really were shocked to be in that room today, and therefore names are already being put out. The last leadership battle runner-up was Kate Forbes, former Finance Secretary, but her opposing views on things like gender issues means that she will not get the backing of the Scottish Greens. Who would? John Swinney, an SNP stalwart, former Deputy First Minister amongst many roles he's held. He is already getting the backing. The SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, says that he would support him. Other SNP sources have been telling me he is the one they would back and are telling other colleagues to do so. He's likely to stay in the next few days, whether he will stand, but one thing's for sure, the SNP are going to want to do everything they can to avoid a toxic leadership battle for the second year in a row.
Louise Scott in Edinburgh, thank you.